What's everybody? What's going on? I meant to say what's up. That's a little bit weird to come in like that. I actually had to run and take care of something for my daughter, so like I had to rush back here while the countdown timer was going. Anyway, welcome. This is my first live stream on YouTube. I like this format a lot better than the normal YouTube format. I found YouTube was a good way for me to kind of get some information out to people and on common problems in astrophotography and some other places, but I really prefer this format better. So I'm just going to roll with it a little bit and see how it goes. Got a good bit of stuff coming on tap for tonight. So we're going to do some imaging of M33 and the Heart of the Heart Nebula. I imaged them some last night, and I'm going to be using my ASIAir Pros and ASIAir Plus to image those. Got them up already, ready to go. And then talk about a couple things that have kind of been hanging out, right? So first of all, my ASIAir Plus review. There's a lot of people have done kind of unboxing videos and stuff like that, but I just want to take a look at some of the new features, what makes it different from the ASIAir Pro, and what I like and what I don't like. That'll be coming out first. And then as of late, not only posts on Facebook, but one of my favorite astrophotography YouTubers, Queeve the Lazy Geek, posted a video about his EDPH2. And to be honest with you, my thoughts on it, I have recorded and deleted a video about that series of scopes probably 4 times. I didn't want to like spark up any controversy around them, but or like reignite some of the drama that's been going on with that series of Sharpstar scopes, but I'm just going to go ahead and get it out tonight. I think with a lot of issues that have come up, there's been a couple of Facebook posts, a couple of YouTube videos. Even Queeve has noticed some chromatic aberration in his scope. So I'm going to knock all those out, give my thoughts on it tonight, and maybe do a little bit of processing. I've got some data from last night. I want to see how it looks. I'm going to add probably 2 more nights on it because I think the data I got last night looks really good. I spent a good bit of time kind of coming up with the framing for it. Well, enough time. Let's put it that way. So without further ado. So first of all, using BlueStacks to emulate Android in order to use your ASIAir Pros, not supported. So you're on your own. It works really good for me. I've done a bunch of astrophotography streams over on Twitch. A lot of people come in passing, they check it out, they say, oh, cool, and then they kind of bail. But some people stick around for the whole thing, but usually they last about 2.5 hours, and I'll probably get close to that tonight. But we'll see how everything goes and if we have any questions, stuff like that. So I've got 2 rigs out tonight. I've got my Raptor 61. Which is one of the scopes we'll be talking about tonight, and then an Edge HD. So the Edge is going to be doing I'm just going to be using my Raptor for M33, and I'll be using the Edge for the Heart of the Heart SH Sharpstar 190, I think. So I could get a lot closer to M33, but my Esprit is off for some warranty repair. So I only have the Raptor and the Edge kind of available, and I wanted to use the Edge for the Heart of the Heart. And if I can put rigs out, I'm putting rigs out and doing some imaging. That's just the way it goes. So anyway, off we go. We'll get this guy started first. So a couple of things that you missed. So the first thing that you missed is I've already installed and polar aligned everything. Here's the picture of the scopes. This is a live view of my scopes out back right now. I've already installed everything, done my balancing, polar aligned. I've done all that first. They're both Skywatcher rigs. So I have a EQ6R Pro and an EQM35 Pro for the smaller scope. I like it. I'm expecting some trouble out of the EQM35, so maybe we'll get the Edge going first and then mess with the EQM35. It's a little bit wonky on deck, and I found out there was a firmware update yesterday actually, and I went ahead and applied that this afternoon, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better. But we'll go ahead and get those guys running and get this moving. So I've already done all that stuff already. We're at the point where we just want to start imaging. So first things first, When it comes to polar alignment, if you have a lot of the Skywatcher rigs are really popular. So when you do your polar alignment with the ASIAir Pro, you take an exposure, you go here to PA. I'm not going to do it now, but you take your exposure, rotate 60 degrees, take another exposure, and you do your polar alignment. On the Skywatcher rigs, if you want to move, if it says to move left, you want to turn the knobs backwards. If it says move right, turn them forwards. Those are the ones on the sides. And then up is clockwise and down is counterclockwise. So you'll get the kind of in the groove. Every scope is a little bit different depending on the focal length, about how far you have to move it to make changes. But you kind of get used to that. It's kind of a feel thing. So I've already done all that. And typically before you polar on, you have to make sure something's in focus, right? So you have to be able to see the scope has to be able to see what it's doing. But the way you focus, make sure you can at least see something, at least you can plates off. And then do your polar alignment. I go through a focusing routine before I slew, right? Because if I'm slightly out of focus and the ASIAir Pro tries to go to the target, it tries to plates off. And if it can't see right, it's probably not going to work. So I do that first. I've already done that. So we're pretty much ready to go to our target. So I didn't really change any framing on M33, but I'm going to show you to do this anyway, because I'm going to do it on the other one. So I go to image management. And I'll just go to the first one because it's closer to nighttime. See what time it is. Make sure M33 has cleared the trees by my house. That's one thing you need to be aware of. So right from your image management photos that you've taken before, you can plate solve them and then go directly to that same spot. Go. So let's check out the scope cam, see if we can see it moving. All right, the little boy back in the back is on his way to the target. See how we do. Changes. And this is why like ASIAir Pro makes everything so easy. I started out using a PC out there and it got really annoying. Also because I started using kind of more automation in the winter time, and I didn't really like leaving a PC out there. So this will come up with our centering image. Let me see, make sure there's no trees in it. Yeah, it's a little streaky because it starts imaging before you're ready. So what I'll do is I'll get the guiding going, and like dead simple. And this is the thing I love about the ASIAir Pro. Looks a little bit overexposed. There's a lot of light pollution because the moon is ginormous. That's why I'm shooting targets that are somewhat away from the moon based on where I live. So it's going to go ahead and calibrate. That could take a while and it may fail, right? So the EQM35 has a good bit of backlash, particularly in deck, and I'm hoping that this this firmware update, which apparently, and I found this from one of Nico Carver's viewers when I was looking through the comments, because he had demoed an EQM35, and they said that there was a firmware update that fixed like the tooth count or something on the gears. So it was something was wonky with it. And I really noticed that in my guiding. So it takes a good bit of time to get the guiding going. So while that's working, I'm going to get the edge started. So these are all images from last night. So one of the reasons I want to use image management here to do this is because I spent a good bit of time on the rotation of the camera and the framing last night. So it's not exactly like I can go straight to Sharpstar Sh2-190, but it will have like the center of the heart in the middle of the image. I want it moved over to the left a little bit. So essentially what I did is I just looked at a picture of it figured out like which orientation my view was in, and then rotated things the way I want them. It's not perfect, but it looks pretty good. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So I'm going to leave that everything exactly the same until I'm done imaging this target. Start our guiding. I noticed my off-axis guider was a little bit off. So a lot of people talk about off-axis guiding on the edge with the ZWO off-axis guider. This is what it looks like with a ASI 174mm mini, small one. So that's all you get out of the image, but plenty for guiding. Plenty of stars there for multi-star guiding. And it really just depends on what you're looking at. Now these stars look like booty. Could probably fix that focus a little bit, but it's been guiding fine. I've been like at 0.35, 0.39 or so. So we'll get that going. Let's see how this is going. That actually calibrated well. So I didn't see, there's usually a lot of backlash compensation, but this is working. So the reason I like the live stream format better than just YouTube is, one, I'd rather just do a lot of this stuff on the fly because it's more fun. People have a chance to ask questions. You're not responding back and forth to comments. Like some people respond back, some people don't. But I've got a lot more experience in live streaming than I do with making YouTube videos. Plus, when my work goes crazy, I don't really have time to edit. So just knocking all the things down. So that's doing its job. Plus, I mean, you can jump on the internet, grab a beverage, and talk about astrophotography. I mean, come on. What could be worse? So this is part of my normal workflow. So I go to the target, get my guiding started, then I focus again, and then I pick my exposure time. So that's taking some test images, looking at how things are. One thing that we'll probably talking about in a second. See, this is having a little bit of problem north-south. This is typical of and it makes me a little bit frustrated. I think I need to take it apart and tune it. But once you get it going, it actually does pretty well. All right, so we're guiding. The edge is already done. Settle down a little bit. Not terrible, not great. Balancing has been a little bit tough on my edge since I put the finder scope on. I used to not have one on there, but since I've been doing planetary with it, I have the finder scope because that's kind of clutch. But we'll let that settle down a little bit. Like I said, the guide star is not great. It'll probably get better a little bit later on. So we'll focus again. Okay. Yeah, taking like a million steps to calibrate. This is fairly typical with the EQ M35. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to fix it. It may fail and I may have to start over. Most of the time it fails on the east-west calibration. I may have to do that a couple times, but like I said, once you get it settled, it's pretty. Rough. 27 steps, 26. It's got to go pretty far. So one thing I definitely have to do is say thank you to one of the kind of Twitch coaches for putting out copyright free music that I can use. Not my favorite jams, but it just kind of hangs out in the back. I've kind of gotten used to some of these songs. This keeps me company. So again, once I get on target, start guiding, redo my autofocus, and then I just get to imaging. I guess now is a good time I need to talk about it. So one thing that's new in the ASIAir ecosystem as far as software goes is the plan mode, where you can add a target, tell it to do stuff. One of the things that's good about that plan mode is at the end of your run, you can send the scope home, you can turn off the cooler, and that's the one thing you can't do in auto run. So in auto run, you can send everything home and shut it off, but you can't just turn off the cooler, or just turn off the cooler and leave the ASIAir Pro on, or ASIAir Plus on. So why do I want to do that? One really big reason is I don't want my scope covered in dew, right? So if the optical apparatus, like the actual glass, gets a bunch of dew on it, then it dries, gets dew on it, dries, gets dew on it, dries. You're building up spots and garbage on there. I'd rather leave the dew heaters on until the morning, and then everything's clear. I can bring it in the house, leave it powered up if I want. Everything gets back down to temperature, and I don't have moisture going on and off of the glass. So I would really like that feature to also be an auto run. But in most cases, plan mode is okay. But what I haven't figured out how to do is to use plan mode to use an image management plate solve. Like, I guess I could get the coordinates off it, load them into the plan, and then do it that way. But I kind of thought about it too late. Now, if this thing completes, it says it's guiding. Let's see how it does. So it's going to take a while to get the deck axis down in there. And I usually just let it run for a while because it's going to be completely wonky until it gets settled. So sometimes it takes up to like 10 minutes. So I'm just going to let that roll. And focus this guy. The guiding accuracy doesn't matter too much. Looks like this dude's ready. How's my guy? Great. So you can see on the RA axis, I'm going up, down, up, down, up, down. Let's see if I can't cool that. Last night I was hovering right here about between 3.5, 3.9. It was super smooth. Terrible. So let's take a test shot. Sure we're good on that front. See how this guy's doing. So one thing I noticed, the refractor's V curve looks way better than it does on my edge. May have to play with the step size, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not super fixated on everything being perfect. I'd like to have, you know, good images and everything kind of look comfortable, but I'm not like a pixel peeper, right? I'm here to have fun. I have a good time with this. You're taking pictures of space from your backyard. I mean, come on. See, it's not bad. It's kind of chilling out a little bit. the good thing is whatever that, you know, with the sloppiness that's on this EQM35, I didn't have to calibrate my guiding like 6 or 7 times in order to get it to take. Like I said, I think I really need to take it apart and fix it. But it's a great little mount for the price. It takes those lightweight refractors super easy. So you're still waiting to get this deck axis back in here. It's going to take a minute to get it. At least they're both on the graph at this point. But I don't know why it just takes a really, really long time to get this mount to calm down. Like it'll be around RMS errors like 1.6, 1.7, like where it is now, 1.4. And then it'll just kind of chill out. And that's what I have to kind of wait for. But at this focal length, the ultra accurate guiding's not all that necessary. I mean, it's nice and all, but when I first started, I was using this rig on a Star Adventure, and it only tracks on one axis, and it's just basically the clockworks are what's doing it. So. And you can get some great images that way with nice round stars, especially at under 5 minutes. But typically, like when you're not kind of managing 2 rigs at the same time, this goes quick. I'm from the point that I get my gear out up and running is 20 minutes. Because I put everything out every night, so you can see. Like I may leave the mounts out in the daytime, but I take the OTAs down, pack everything up except the cables, and then bring it all inside the house. So if I leave my mounts out, it's even faster because I don't have to, the polar alignment's a lot quicker because they're already aligned. When I come back from, or wake up in the morning, like I'll go to bed and leave these out here. My yard's fenced in, it's locked. Plus this stuff's pretty heavy, so I'll pull, you know, once I put everything out, if the mount's already out there, I throw the OTAs on, make sure everything's balanced, and off I go. Pretty much running in 20 minutes. See how we did. You can see on the guiding here, it's starting to calm down. It takes a while, but it'll calm down. So here you can kind of see what I'm going to talk about later. So some of these bright kind of blue giant stars got lots and lots of chromatic aberration there. Only sometimes. It depends on the conditions. And it's manageable, I would say. And I got a pretty good sample. All right, so that's our 300-second exposure. That's what I'm rolling with. I'm not going to go any higher because some of those stars get a little bit blown out and they look a little bit bubbly. But it's okay. We can manage. So this guiding is not terrible. It's not the greatest I've ever achieved, but under 1, good enough. I could probably focus a little bit better. Select a different main guide, but it's okay. It'll calm down. All right, so let's get this guy going. So, oops, in my auto run, my darks from earlier today, lights, this is from last night. Fire that up. So I want to go home, but I do not want to shut down the ASIAir. And again, that's because I want the dew heater to continue to run. What I would really, really like is if they gave you the rest of the options that are in the plan. Maybe I have to mess with the plan a little bit more. Like if I kicked off a new plan and I'm at a target now, if it would just import that target and then off I go. But I really like when I use plan mode that I can send everything home, leave the ASIAir on, but turn the cooler off. But these things are made to run for hours and hours and hours. Like it just ran for, 6-8 hours. So why not let it run on another 2 hours, right? So I get up, maybe about 90 minutes after it's done imaging. So that's not too bad, but it would still be nice. Let's put it that way. So while my auto run, done. My imaging session has started. I'm going to flip in 4 hours. Has not been a problem. Off we go. That's it. We're done. Sucker's running. Off to the imaging. Framing looks good. This is about what I wanted last night. I wanted some of that base of the heart, and then with the ASIAirPlus 190 in there. That's good. This is going to be a framer right here, depending on how it stacks. Because there's sometimes a little shiftiness, but we'll take a look at that again in a little bit. All right, so that guy's running. This guy needs to chill. So the one thing that's tough about the EQM is it just doesn't balance well. Mostly because of how stiff it is. I know after a while it'll start to loosen up, but like I said, I really need to take it apart and clean it up. I'm just watching the guiding here. It's not terrible though, so let's just go ahead and roll, and I'll keep an eye on it pretty much throughout the night. So again, auto run. I took my frames this morning. Don't want to shut down. I want to go home. And we're imaging. That guiding's not great. Like I said, it will cool off though. It'll start to calm down. But after a little while, we'll take a look and see how the stars look. Anyway, that's where we are. Done. So usually when I first start imaging, I'll kind of decide on my exposure. This is going to look pretty rough because the moon is super full, but with the amount of nice nights that it's actually clear that I've had over the summer, we're just going to go. All right, that's that. So as you can tell, I'm using the ASIAir Pros and ASIAir Plus. So at least from a feature review, my perspective on these, the two big features are right here. So this kind of onboard memory, a lot of people are saying it's kind of increased the FPS when they're trying to do planetary. I don't use the ASIAir Pro for planetary just for that reason. I mean, you can use ASI Studio, but I use a PC for that mostly because I want that high frame rate, especially when you're using a smaller field of view. But I think after using an ASIAir Pro since I think last February, so I guess what's it been, about 7 months or so, the biggest nits that I see online or that I see people complain about are, one is most certainly the Wi-Fi, and we'll cover that in a second, but it's got an external antenna now. Number two was people not necessarily being technically skilled enough to understand how to back up and restore the SD card. So that RPi will run off the SD card and has the tendency to essentially, if it gets corrupted, you have to restore it with some just some third-party software. Like, you can do it via the command line, but people have some problems doing that, right? So anyway, at this point, it's kind of, you got a self-healing piece of memory there that'll do some firmware validation, ensure that it's going to run correctly, and then it'll boot up and run. So you can reset it, you can auto recover, etc. So that's great. You know, a lot of other folks tried to store their image on the SD card while the OS was running off it, which would cause some problems. But anyway, that part there is good. So, and it's one of the most common problems out there, right? So people having issues with the SD card. The only thing I didn't like about it is when you store the image, you're talking about 32 gigs of storage. Like, those images are pretty big. And if you keep backing them up over time, it has a tendency to take up a bunch of room. So that's a good thing. Wi-Fi for sure. There's been a lot of complaints about the Wi-Fi dropping out, even on the ASIAir Plus. I have not experienced this. Some folks are basically saying that it's could be due to your iOS version. So if you're still on iOS 14, it can drop in and out. iOS 15 has been working great. I haven't noticed that. Mostly because, and you can see where my scopes are, they're pretty much right outside my house. So I have a wireless access point on each floor. So they're built into they're wired inside the house. So there's one in the basement, one in the middle floor, and one on the upper floor. And these obviously are connected to the basement. It's a daylight basement in the back. So they're really not that far from outside. So I don't have any problems with the Wi-Fi. I have both my 5 gigahertz or 5G and 2.4 gigahertz. Those networks are named exactly the same. It just selects based on the health. And I don't have any issues, but this is a key point. And one thing I need to point out is I did have my ASIAir Pros modded to have the external antenna. So the gentleman at Fun and Tech on Etsy, you can find him on YouTube. You can find him on Etsy here in the US. He does a great job, super fast turnaround time, clean work, and the Wi-Fi range on the Pro is spectacular. So I used to run Ethernet out there. So coming from the back door of my house, I had power because I run everything off main. I had 2 Ethernet cables if I had 2 rigs. So it's like you got 3 big long wires running out there, and then they can drag on the rig because the Ethernet cable is kind of heavy. So it was fast, it was easy, but there's a lot of extra stuff that you have to run. So I had my ASIAir Pros modded. I cannot tell the difference between the ASIAir Plus and the ASIAir Pro when it comes to having them on Wi-Fi. It's essentially the same, mostly because I had them modded. One thing that they did do, I really like the 12 volt power output indicators. A lot of times I would turn stuff on and I'm like, why isn't my cooler coming on? It was just because the power point wasn't on, and there's nothing like user wise that would point that out to you. So that's great. The one thing I have is the USB-C port for transferring your data. So now with the you can support with that SD card slot that's not used for the OS. You can actually use that to up to 1 terabyte, I think, TF card, which is really huge. So tons and tons of storage. And then you have the USB-C port for transfer to a PC. Now, that doesn't super work for me, and I'll show you why. So this is the back end of my Esprit, and that's an ASIAir Plus back there. The on this side is where that card and the USB-C are. I'm not going to carry it. First off, this thing's like 15-20 pounds, right? So you have this huge plate. I keep everything in one piece, so I have only two connections that need to go off of this rig. One is from the ASIAir Pro to the mount, and then power. It just keeps everything in one piece. I load it up, plug those two things in, and we're good to go. But I can't get to those, and I'm not going to lug this into my office and then stick a cable into it. I still use a small flash drive. I use a Samsung Fit. They're 128 gigs a piece. I stick those in there in the USB 3 port. They've got thousands of images on them, a couple of them. So I'm not going to use that. Now, is that something other people may use, particularly if they do like the Peter Zelinka method where it's on another tripod? Yes, because then you have the ASIAir Pro, or ASIAir Plus right there to plug it into your PC and transfer everything. I don't use that. And if you can plug a USB stick in there, I'm not going to use a small SD card that you got to get in there and pop out. So I think that was there for, maybe there's some other customer complaints or there's some other issues where kind of people brought it up all the time. That's not really something I'm supremely worried about. So, maybe just because it's on the board that they use, that they could put that interface there. I don't know. I'm not going to use it though. But other than that, I think the main thing, like the width and size, I'm okay with either way. Like you saw on that photo, it fits on my dovetail plate perfectly. Like it's edge to edge, right on there. The ASIAir Pro is a little bit thicker. I had to put some risers there on the on those rings so that the first of all, that kind of captain's wheel would clear the plate, and also to get enough clearance for the ASIAir Pro to be underneath that. But the Plus is a little bit thinner, so it's not an issue. So size, form factor wise, it's totally fine. But I think the real big difference is the external Wi-Fi and the internal storage. So the self-healing firmware is important, because if you totally borked your SD card in the ASIAir Pro, you need to, if you don't have a backup, you need to get another license key from ZWO. A lot of people have been complaining about the online licensing of the ASIAir Plus, but if you use your phone, so it's on the Wi-Fi and has your cellular connection, mine authorized instantly. It was zero problems whatsoever. So I think the main difference is the self-healing firmware piece and the external antenna. So if you have an ASIAir Pro, if it's not modded and the Wi-Fi is really killing you, you don't want a direct line, do direct Ethernet to it, ASIAir Pros or ASIAir Plus is a good buy. If you don't want to use, external storage or, anything like that, ASIAir Pro ASIAir Plus might be a good buy. But at the end of the day, if you have an ASIAir Pro, take the plunge, get it modded, and you can save yourself a couple $100. I think this thing is going to continually improve. I don't see a lot of really big differences between the two, but if any one of those features is kind of like the game breaker for you, by all means, it's worth it. If you don't have an ASIAir product and you want one, just go ahead and get the Plus. You're really not paying that much more, and you get the Wi-Fi. So that's kind of like my final thoughts on this, is that if you have one, go ahead and do the mod. And if it doesn't work, like most of the people that do the work are going to get you a new one if they break it. But really what you're needing out of this is the Wi-Fi. If you're having problems with stability or something like that with the SD card, go ahead and change it. But if you're moderately techie at all, the differences are not that dramatic, right? Like between these two that I was just using, I can't tell the difference between a Plus and a Pro. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. Real easy. Let's see how our scopes are doing. So this is actually, it's kind of wonky. Every once in a while on BlueStacks, you will get the it'll resize the image, and it happens on the mobile as well. Sometimes it'll resize the image and be super huge. It's not terrible. A little bit of CA. Can't zoom in. You can't pinch. I don't know how to pinch on here. You can actually see, I don't worry about it too much. The last like 10 frames, it went behind my house, and I don't worry about it. Some people freak out and they want it to stop. I don't really care. When it goes past the house, you can see like the corner of my house start to come in the frame here. I'm not that worried about it. We're talking about like 20 minutes of data. So just, I can time it like close to the edge where I know it's going to go, but so this is looking good. See, my guiding settled down, 0.38, good enough for government work, right? So that looks pretty good. Stars are a little bit bubbly, but I got some nice detail here, so I'm happy with that. All right, how about we do this? Let's take a look at, I'm gonna fire up PixInsight here, and what I'll do is I'll start stacking the data from last night just so we can see how it looks, and then we'll talk about the Raptor. So I use a naming convention for my stuff. I don't think I have any -20 Celsius darks. I'll use -10s. It won't be perfect, but it'll at least get them calibrated. I think I have a newer set also. So this is just your kind of standard workflow. We can get that started while we're doing this. All right, so here's the deal. We've got 3 scopes that are all based on the same reference design. And I will defend OPT when it comes to when people say that the Raptor, Radian Raptor, is a straight rebrand of the EDPH2. This one here, the Sharpstar 6180PH2. So is it the same scope? Yes and no. And this is how I come to this, right? So I actually got my Raptor after the whole controversy had first started, right? When it was released, that's actually looking for the 6180PH2 was how I found Trevor Jones' Astro Backyard and found out about the Raptor. So I use Reddit quite a bit. On the Astrophotography or Ask Astrophotography Reddit, there's actually kind of a spreadsheet that they had of recommended scopes on different budget. And when I was getting into, when I wanted a small APO, kind of to move up from visual, and I was using camera lenses and stuff, I'm like, okay, I want to get a scope. Everybody recommends to get a small wide field refractor. Okay, great. So I found this, and at the time they were not available. They were on back order just like they are now. So that actually led me, the controversy led me to the Radian Raptor, which was available. So I mentioned Queeve the Lazy Geek earlier. I watched, he did 2 videos on this. One was when is this a rebrand? And the second one was based on, I guess we've talked to OPT and got some details about the differences. And those differences were like better QA on the threads, better QA on the focuser. They upgraded the glass, and some other small items. So different rings, you get a couple of extra accessories. And that's kind of like, we're talking about $300 difference between the EDP-H2 here and the Raptor at $999. So when you add some of the accessories, like people joke about the backpack, I like it. I use that as my camera backpack. It's like, hey, free backpack, basically. The rings are spectacular. They look a lot like the Prima Luce rings. I won't bring them up here, but if you look at those, they look very similar. So they resource the rings. You get a couple of plates with it. You get the fat dovetail plate, and you get the smaller bar. And you get a bunch of these accessories. So add that up, you're really arguing about $130 price difference between the two. And it's not just a paint job. So, and I'll explain that a little bit. So we've talked about the glass. So this is also why I won't buy another Sharpstar product. So Sharpstar, yes, they make the Radian Raptor, they make the EDP-H2, and they make this TS Optics version of the same scope. So one thing you will notice though is that down here in the fine print, you see Ohara FPL 53, and everybody's saying, "Oh, is the Raptor made with FPL 53, or what's the rating of this glass?" The truth is, it's not any of those, right? It's made just like the Sharpstar version. That glass is made from an undisclosed third party. They're not going to tell you who it is, and it's probably another white box manufacturer of the glass that is to a certain spec. So I'll back up a second. OPT probably doesn't have, and Trevor don't have the technical capability to design the scope from scratch. So from a product development perspective, what they did was they said, hey, this is what we want to build. Let's put this out to a bunch of those different manufacturers, because you got, Sharpstar, you got Cinta, there's, a couple of others that actually do the manufacturing for a bunch of different vendors. And that's why you see a lot of similar designs based on who's doing it, but they specify it. So they put this recommendation out there. They said, hey, we want this stuff. So each one of those vendors, if they want to bid on being the manufacturer for that scope based on the specification, they're not going to design something from the ground up, particularly if you don't know if somebody's going to sell it or not, or somebody's going to buy it. So they take one of their existing designs, and in this case, Sharpstar used the 61 EDP-H2 and submitted that as the reference, likely with some modifications. So, OPT goes through all those, and then they decide, yes, we want this one, and these are the modifications we want to make. So if they increase the kind of stock glass, like let's say they say our vendor that provides our glass gives us these 4 levels. So in the EDP-H2, let's say it's at level 3. OPT say, well, I want the next level up. It's not quite Ohara FPL 53, but it's better than what's in the EDP-H2. So they do all those things. They do some changes with QA, like, Queeve mentioned the threads, etc. And all that in my head from a product management and product design point of view is just saying NRE costs and changes in your overall BOM cost, right? So NRE costs are non-recurring engineering costs. They need to make some changes with their line. Even if you want some cosmetic changes, that costs money, right? So those types of things, coupled with the additional accessories, they redesign the rings, etc., is what leads you to the different price. So is it based on the EDP-H2 reference design? Absolutely. We all know that. Is it a new paint job only? It is not, right? So I will defend OPT to the gills for that, right? And people saying like, oh, Trevor didn't design anything. He was just the face. I don't believe that either, because the person that comes up with the requirements and says what it should look like has a hand in designing the thing as well. So I'm okay with all those things. I have no problem there. Like I said, I own the Raptor. I saw a lot of this stuff after all the shenanigans were over. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and stack these real quick. So I don't do image integration in weighted batch preprocessing. I do it later. I'm going to leave everything default. This is just a test to see what my data looks from last night. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so all of those people, everybody that had a hand in it is technically the folks that designed it. So like I said, I'll defend them all day. That is not just a straight rebrand. And neither is the TS Optics version, right? So this is a Sharpstar EDP-H2, but Telescope Service said, we want this glass in it. So they specified that. Everything else could be completely the same. They specify the glass they want, and that's what they get. So one thing that's confusing is here on Agina's page, they have a disclosure somewhere. Here it is. In recent days, with the buzz around the Radian Raptor, we have received a few inquiries on whether or not this scope uses FPL53 glass or whether there are two optical versions of this scope on the market. Based on the information provided to us by Sharpstar on October 3rd, this is more than a year ago, and people are still arguing about this. They use an extra low dispersion or ED element on this scope, but they do not disclose the type of glass. Very likely from contracting. They don't want you to know who's the one that manufactures it. Despite some speculation that to the contrary on online forums, there is only one optical version of this scope worldwide, while some other international dealers state that this scope has an FPL53 element. Sharpstar itself does not specify this. So there's people that read that and they say, oh, this is proof that the EDP-H2, the Sharpstar version, the Raptor, and the TS Optics is exactly the same. Like, and then they say that you're an idiot for your reading comprehension if you don't agree. But I read that completely different. There's one optical version of the EDP-H2. The Raptor is another optical version, right? And then the TS Optics version is the one with FPL53. It's really not that hard to kind of break down, right? So anyway, everybody's complaining about chromatic aberration, and you know, you see it on the forums from the EDP-H2, you see it from the Raptor, and you also see it from Sharpstar's new line, the ASIAir scopes. So I was looking at, you know, when they first came out, I was looking at an FRA 400 and the FRA 600. Looked really nice, great specifications. But when people start getting samples in hand, they're noticing some of the same things that you notice out of these smaller scopes. Oops. That's looking pretty good, boy. There's a little bit bubbly. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and run that since I only have a little bit of data. To just see how it looks. Anyway, so you know, you've got those three scopes, and you have the ASIAir line. When people started getting samples, and I was seeing that they were having the exact same problems. You know, people have found out, or at least figured out, that the issues with the EDP-H2 are from the reducer, and you also have a fast system that's somewhat prone to it on both those scopes, but you're seeing out of all Sharpstar stuff. So essentially, what they're manufacturing on all of those lines of scopes, there's some issues with QA. So like my Raptor sample is not terrible. In some shooting conditions, I do see a little bit of CA, but it's not a deal breaker for me. Particularly when you're shooting nebulae with, you know, more restrictive filters. But some other people's are horrid, right? So you have a really wide spread of QA when it comes to these coming out of the pipe. You also see them in the ASIAir line. So there's some people that have posted FRA 400 images that are great. You have other people posting and they're absolutely terrible. So Sharpstar's glass, the way they source it, I just don't think I just don't think the consistency is there. So I'm happy with my Raptor. I'll continue to shoot with it. Plus I use ZWO cameras and the whole color scheme is black and red. But I'm not gonna buy anymore. I think it is the long and short of it. You know, until they get the consistency down and get that dialed in. You know, OPD's even having problems with their kind of their warranty service, like, you know, folks saying, hey, I got really bad CA, and the more this comes out online, the more people complain about it, the more people are going to call them, and it's warranted in some, but in others it's not. I've seen some folks that claim chromatic aberration when it's really just over processing, or their stars are completely blown out, like they got blue fringe around their blue stars. Hey, like they're blown out like hell. You know, I've got red fringe around my red stars. What do you expect? So, you know, 6 of one, half does the other, but I've seen enough inconsistency out of their gear that I'm just not going to buy anymore. And that's kind of my final take on it. So from a product management perspective, the Raptor is not a straight rebrand of the EDPH2. When they made some changes, that's fine. It could be some stuff under the hood. It's kind of like when you go on Amazon, you see 6 different versions of the same thing. The name brand one's going to be a little bit better. Why is that? Things like QA, materials used, etc. So, and it's more expensive. So with all the changes that they made, I don't think the price point is that far off. It might be a little steep, especially for your first scope, but they need to kind of recover some of the individual tooling that they did in order to get exactly what they want. The ring system is super nice. Like I said, it looks like the Prima Luce ones, and we all know how expensive their stuff is. So, and then, you know, with the whole turnkey piece, yes, I get it. You know, at the end of the day, it's nice. And it does what I want it to do, and it did what I wanted to do when I got my first APO. So that's that. So if you put in my order of preference, I would say the EDPH2 is at the bottom, Raptor's in the middle, and the TS Optics version is on the top, right? Just because of those glass changes. You know, but if they continue to be inconsistent, the only one I would go for would be the TS Optics one. If you really wanted this reference design, do that, or go elsewhere. That's pretty much my only recommendations there. Hey, how do we do? Looks pretty nice. Framing's not great. It's not terrible. It's going to make a nice image, right? And that's 1 night of data. Got some pretty good detail in there. So my kids are sick, but they seem to be sleeping okay. I've been kind of keeping an eye out, or an ear out for them. But what I will do is, let's just do a little bit on this, just some like really basic. I'm just going to do some of the fast stuff just to see what I can do here. But I think even with minimal processing with just the auto stretch, it looks really good. While that's running, let's check in on our scopes. This is going to look bad because of the moon. It's not terrible. You see a lot of glow over here. It's like I said, it would probably be better to use my Esprit on this target, but it is what it is. It doesn't look terrible. I don't want to go to 3 minutes because the light pollution is going to blow it out a little bit. At the end of the day, if I'm putting 1 scope out, I'll put 2 out, and I'll just kind of deal with it. Because the more data I collect and the more I practice with imaging, the better you get. So this is going to be a little bit jacked because of the Still running. Now these numbers will fluctuate because of the dithering, but I mean, that looks good. Got lots of good detail coming straight through there. Dual subs. Of course, it's stretched a little bit. Could I go to a little bit longer of an exposure? Absolutely, I could. But I think it's fine. It's going to come out nice. Like I said, I do this for fun. I'm not like a pixel peeper, and I like figuring things out. So if you're looking for me to be the next whomever, you're in the wrong place. Yeah, so that's super red, but that looks great. Like, this is one night worth of data. Got some really nice nebulosity in here. The sharpless part here looks really good. These stars are a little bit blown out. That's okay. We can manage it because that's kind of the price I pay to get this detail in here. Only get better. Okay with it. But that came out real nice. So, and like I said, that's I had to throw away. I think I blinked these earlier this afternoon while my son was taking a nap, and I think I had about 5 or 6 subs that I got rid of. But this is only, so that would be like 68 or so images last night. So 68 5-minute subs. So if I shoot that for 3 nights, you're looking at about 15 hours worth of data. So that's pretty good. I see a lot of people shoot multiple targets in the same night. And I guess I used to do that as well, just to see how many things I could find, especially when I was using a star tracker, because locating the things is what took me the longest. So I would practice doing that. But now that I have kind of more, not exactly time on my hands, because I'm just going to go to bed after this and let the thing run. But I'm interested in getting a little bit better images. Not perfect. I'm not trying to be the guy that spends, you know, $8,000 on a single OTA, just to kind of squeeze that out there. But have fun, take some cool images, have a good time with processing, and continue to practice. But I like to take multiple nights with data, because it actually makes your processing easier. The less data you have, the harder it is. But anyway, I think that's all I got for tonight. We're gonna go ahead and, you know, this was pretty much my test for live streaming via YouTube. We got our imaging started, super easy. Talked about the ASIAir Plus. Kind of cleared my mind about getting information out about the whole EDPH Mark II Radian Raptor drama. Anyway, so I would call this a successful test for the first stream. Yay. Hopefully this works as well. See, look, I got everything working on for YouTube. So it's a good thing. I'll probably start doing these. Thursday night is typically when I stream astrophotography on Twitch. I'm probably going to start doing it on YouTube because the interface is a little bit cleaner. And most of you that enjoy astrophotography are going to be on YouTube. So either way, if you did join tonight, thanks so much. Maybe next time we'll see each other again, and I'll be very likely on Thursday. I'll be processing this data that you see in front of you. Either way, thanks for stopping by. And if you're watching later, see you next time.